Mark Zuckerberg went onto Joe Rogan last week and talked about all sorts of things, from jujitsu, which he was trying to make himself seem like a super cool jujitsu guy. It was like this PR stunt. It was literally just Mark Zuckerberg going on Joe Rogan trying to act as if he's a human being, because like I said, Facebook has just been bleeding dry from users. You know, I don't know anybody who generally is on Facebook very much who's not over the age of, I don't know, maybe 40 consistently now. And I used to think that was wrong, but I am completely off of Facebook now. And I would say I haven't been on it for like 3 years, really. So it's definitely rings true. But the FBI came out and made a statement back to Mark Zuckerberg after he made a statement about the Hunter Biden laptop. So we'll actually look at that statement that he has. So let's go ahead and listen to this clip. It's just a few minutes here, so we'll discuss it as we go on. I got about 2 or 3 of them for you, and then we'll get into each parts of it. The very first one will start right now.
That I really admire about what you do is, it seems like you have a real commitment to giving a voice to a lot of different types of people, right? It feels like a big part of your theme is, you have a lot of people on the show who would just nowhere, like no chance that they get the exposure that they get from talking to you elsewhere. And, part of the question that I wonder about is in Instagram and in Facebook, you have your follow graph, right? You have your, the people you choose to follow, and you have your friends, but can we build AI systems that can also just help recommend better content that you didn't know to follow yet, because it's kind of it's up your alley. It's like that I really admire about.
The one thing I really admire about you, Joe Rogan, is that you love the opinions of everybody. It's like he had these ideas of these things that he wanted to say, and the way that he said them is so clunky. And so he goes, the thing I love about you is you give a platform to so many different ideas, coming from the man who silences more people than Chinese Communist Party. Mark Zuckerberg coming out and trying to do the neuro-linguistic programming of just saying what he thinks you're going to believe, and if he says it enough times you'll believe it, that he actually cares to give people platforms, right? Like this robot going on to Joe Rogan and trying in every way to manipulate the general public into thinking that he's not a evil dictator that's wholly against free speech. Like listening to all of these parts where he talks about, as somebody who is banned, like is shadow banned from Instagram. Shadow banning is a thing, right? You see your posts go up and down in volume and like reach, and that's fine, right? They even changed it so that they show you if you're recommended or not now. And that's fine too. But you literally cannot even search for my Instagram and see my page unless you fill in the full name of it. Red Pill Revolt. You even see my backup page before you'll see my main page of Red Pill Revolt. It's crazy. And now there was an article that came out that talked about how he said shadow banning isn't real. From my understanding, I haven't listened to the whole thing yet. He hasn't discussed specifically shadow banning, but he did discuss like content reach and some things, which we'll listen to a little bit more about here. But it is infuriating for me to listen to Mark Zuckerberg talk about censorship as if it's a bad thing, when he's literally the biggest, like the owner of the biggest company who's censoring the most people across platforms in the history of man ever, who's able to filter speech and manipulate elections. And that's what the next thing I think we'll listen to is here, where he actually talks about Hunter Biden's laptop. So let's see if we can listen to that clip.
When they're a big news item that's controversial. Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York
we
Post.
had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all.
Now, one big thing he just said there that everybody has a little bit of an outcry for at this point is that the FBI went to Facebook and told them to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story, which means they also went to Twitter, which means they also went to, all of the other social platforms that relatively don't matter compared to Meta and Twitter and maybe TikTok, but they're probably not controlling the Chinese Communist Party's web app. That's a really bold, really big statement to show that the FBI is colluding with social media, private sector companies to manipulate freedom of speech surrounding an election against the acting president of the United States during that time. They went behind his back, went to the social media platforms and said, hey, you should watch out for this. And even if they didn't said you need to filter this completely, and which Twitter did not allow for the dissemination of the article from, I believe it was the Washington Post that posted it, but didn't allow it to be circulated at all on the direction of the FBI. The FBI under the president of the United States at the time, who apparently didn't want him, him having a fair election against Joe Biden with all of the knowledge. Because if you understand what was in that laptop, you understand that Hunter Biden at the very least is compromised. And if Hunter Biden is compromised, that means Joe Biden could potentially be compromised. And that's by foreign governmental entities. That's by, blackmail and everything that we saw on the more recent iCloud leak. All of that is true. But the American people weren't able to vote as if that was the case. In fact, a lot of people may have went to vote as if this was something that they should have rallied around, was the fake Russia misinformation hoax. Like, how is the FBI going to even do that? Right? So the FBI responds, and we'll look at that in a minute, but let's go ahead and finish a little bit more of this clip here.
When they're a big news item.
I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false. The distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it. You could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less. So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely...
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful. But basically, a lot of people were still able to share it. We got a lot of complaints that was the case. Obviously this is a hyper political issue. So depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor it enough or censored it way too much. But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's like very professional law enforcement, they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
Did they specifically say you need to be on guard about that story?
No, I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically fit the pattern.
When something like that turns out to be real, is there regret for not having it evenly distributed and for throttling the distribution of that story?
What do you mean evenly distributed?
I mean evenly in that it's not suppressed. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because it turned out after the fact. The fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false, right? So basically, it had this period where it was getting less distribution. So yeah. I mean, but I think I think it sucks though. I think in the same way that probably having to go through like a criminal trial but being proven innocent in the end sucks. Like, it still sucks to have like that you had to go through.
Yeah, only that criminal trial was hinging on who became the president of the United States, and as we're finding out, the reaction to what could potentially turn into a world war with how our president is responding to Taiwan, China, Russia, and all of it. So yeah, maybe a little bit more than sucks, Mark Zuckerberg, that potentially Ukraine invaded or Russia invaded Ukraine. Maybe China's going to attempt to overthrow Taiwan in the next 3 years. Supply chains are broken all over the world. Yeah, maybe a little bit more than sucks, Mark Zuckerberg, that you interfered with an election, and so did the FBI.
when they're a big news in the FBI talking to you that it wasn't real and that there was going to be some propaganda. So what do you do?
Yeah.
And then if you just let it get out there, and what if it changes the election and it turns out to be bullshit? That's a real problem. And I would imagine that those kind of decisions are the most difficult. The decisions of like what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what would you do in that situation?
I don't know what I would do. I would have to like really thoroughly. Well, first of all, you're dealing with the New York Post, which.
All right. So let's go ahead and read the FBI's response. The FBI responded to the Joe Rogan interview with Mark Zuckerberg, where Mark Zuckerberg said that the FBI told him to censor the Hunter Biden laptop. And the FBI went on to say this. It says the FBI said that it routinely notifies private sector entities, including social media companies, of information related to potential threats after Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg said Facebook limited the distribution of a controversial story leading up to the 2020 election because of an FBI warning. The statement followed Zuckerberg's appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast on Thursday, in which Zuckerberg said Facebook limited stories on the newsfeed related to the New York Post's article about President Biden's son, Hunter Biden. In his laptop, the FBI warned the company to be aware of potentially polarizing content. Russia used social media platforms like Facebook to post intentionally polarizing content ahead of the 2016 election. The FBI, and this is in quotes, the FBI has provided companies with foreign threat indicators to help them protect their platforms and customers from abuse by foreign malign influence actors. The FBI said that it works with federal, state, local, and private sector partners to keep the public informed on potential threats, but it cannot request or order companies to take any action based on the information provided. Meta tweeted after the podcast episode was posted online that Zuckerberg has shared this information publicly before when he testified to the Senate almost 2 years ago after the FBI warned Facebook about potential foreign threats. The Post story on Hunter Biden reported that the FBI allegedly obtained a laptop belonging to him that contained information related to a federal investigation into him. We don't need to know that. We've done whole episodes on that. But it says that some of the emails on the laptop have confirmed to be authentic, but no charges have been brought, and no demonstrable wrongdoing from the president or his son has been confirmed. Yeah. Okay, dude, the Hill has lost its way. I used the Hill for a while. They recently basically took off one of the individuals who was on The Rising because she wanted to be a part of the Anthony Fauci interview that they did. And you can tell all of their content has been just leaning left and left and left. And so you see something like that where it's no demonstrable wrongdoing. Maybe the inappropriate text messages between him and his underage niece that all of his family called him weird, creepy, and did not let them be around his children for being a part of. Maybe it's the Chinese the energy deals that he made with Ukrainian energy companies like Burisma, utilizing his dad's influence to do so. Maybe it's the removal of a certain judge before he's going to enact a decision on Hunter Biden and this wrongdoing that he allegedly didn't do. Maybe it's the peddling of his father's influence to China and the millions and millions and millions of dollars that he made from companies that he had no part in making profitable. I don't know. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's all of the prostitutes and hookers that his dad sent money to him to pay for. Maybe, but maybe not. So anyways, the FBI admits to it, right? Admits that they send information to private sector companies. And that is a big problem. So let's go ahead and listen to this last one here, and then we'll wrap it up. But I think this is important too. And is so infuriating and laughable to hear Mark Zuckerberg talk about censorship. And the last thing I do want to listen to here is about the governing boards. Okay, he talks about Facebook's and Meta's governance boards that he established. So let's listen to it.
And kind of celebrated free expression advocate, and he helped me set the thing up. And I think like setting up forms of governance around that are independent of us, that basically get the final say on a bunch of these decisions, and that's a step in the right direction. I mean, in the Hunter Biden case that you talked about before, I don't want our company to decide what's misinformation and what's not. So we work with third parties and basically let different organizations do that. Now, I mean, then you have the question of, are those organizations biased or not? And that's
Yes. The answer is yes. Those organizations are biased. And yes, those organizations are funded for and set up by large conglomerate corporations who are also the ones funding these extremist organizations like Antifa. Yes, they are compromised. And he just pointed to it, which, oh, yeah, we send it to third parties. And maybe those third parties are compromised, but I'm not going to talk about that. Well, maybe you should. If they're the ones that are dictating what truth is, and they're the ones that are, interfering in elections, maybe you should look into their bias because it's important, especially if it isn't you guys and you're offloading it specifically for legality purposes, which is all the reason why they sent it to third parties, right? So it's unbelievable that he sits there and goes, yeah, you can question that, which is fine. And we won't get into that, but maybe you should get into that, because why in the world would we allow third-party entities that have never existed before to determine what's fact and what's false, what you can say and what you can't say, what makes you banned and what makes you not banned, even if it's truth, right? Because how many people lost their platforms for posting about Hunter Biden?